Welcome to Coffey Talk, real stories from real people. I'm your host, Kate Coffey-Bacon, and every Monday we'll sit down for honest conversations about successes, failures, and the lessons we learn from both. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's talk. Welcome to Coffey Talk. These are real stories by real people. Today we are diving into a topic that we need to be having. It's one of our most important conversations right now, and that is the topic of voting. Now, before you reach for your radio dial, Jessica, did I just say radio dial?
You for sure did.
I sure did say radio dial.
I know. And for anybody listening, that is...
I just dated myself a little bit with radio dial. Before you reach for the pause button, please know this is a nonpartisan podcast. We are talking about the importance of voting and why we should vote, especially in this election coming up. So this is a conversation we need to have. I've said Coffey Talk, if we need to talk about good things, hard things, we're going to talk about it all on Coffey Talk. So here we are today. Jessica, thank you so much today for joining me.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. So my guest, Jessica Kraisinger, is dedicated to strengthening democracy through education, through empowerment, through action. And I contacted Jessica a week ago.
It feels like a lifetime ago, but it was a week ago.
It was a week ago. We just came back from a doozy of a conference together. And I contacted her because she's doing some really cool things on Instagram. So I contacted her and asked her to please come on to Coffey Talk and let's talk about this. So let's jump right in. Let's start with your story. What first sparked your passion for helping people get involved in the voting process?
So I think there's probably some similarities to all of us. This was, if I take us back to 2020, which I apologize, I realize it's not a year we want to relive all the way through. I was, I think as all of us were just kind of bombarded with a lot of information coming at us. It was a world we hadn't really seen before with the pandemic and things like that. And I kept feeling like my anxiety was up. I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to help. I didn't know how to act. I didn't know what to do. And so the thought came to me, I used to do this weekly video series years ago at a job I used to have. I used to call it IT 2-minute warning. And so really I was just doing like little tidbits of Microsoft licensing information on a weekly basis. And I had this thought, I'm like, well, that was just about educating people about Microsoft licensing. I wasn't taking a position. It was really just, this is what happens. And this is kind of the thing. And I thought, I wonder if I could take that format and that thought process and turn it into just helping people to sort of bridge the gap with information on voting, right? Let's just take away any of the stigmas, any of the questions, and maybe just get some information out there and also try to make it fun. That it's a very serious thing, but we can have some fun while we do it too. So that's kind of where the genesis of the idea came from. And it was really helpful for me personally because it was an outlet for me to, do research and make these videos and have these conversations. And I also just kind of, I got people that came up to me and like, oh my God, thank you so much for doing that. I love your videos and that kind of stuff. And so when you get that sort of response, it kind of bolsters you on. You think to yourself, okay, I may not be reaching millions, but I'm reaching a few and that feels good. So that's kind of where we started with.
Well, I'll echo the sentiments of everyone else that's come to you. I love what you've been doing. I follow you on Instagram. You are an industry friend of mine. And so every time I saw it, I just thought this is so important because it was done in the purest way, in a just get out and vote and let your voice be heard. And
right.
It didn't feel threatening, but there was so much peace in your stories and I felt that coming from you. So that's why I asked you,
that.
You had this feeling of what can I do? Everything just felt so much bigger than you. And, there's that, I think it's a Mr. Rogers story, right? Of a kid that's walking on the beach and he's picking up sand dollars and throwing them back into the water. And a man comes up to him and he says, there are hundreds of sand dollars on this shore. What are you doing? You can't make a difference. And he's, yeah, but I'm making a difference to this one. And he
Yeah,
throws it back in the water.
absolutely.
So that's what you're doing. Even if you make a difference to one, and so, you're the wind beneath my wings.
I appreciate that very much.
So
Yeah,
I love all of that so much. It's such a great reminder that engagement can start even with one conversation.
absolutely.
Even with one connection. So let's talk about why voting still matters so deeply, especially when it can sometimes feel like the way you felt, like it's too big. Everything's too big. There's a lot of noise out there. So, from your perspective, why does voting still matter today more than ever?
This is gonna feel like a pretty simple answer. I think realistically, in terms of our lives and in terms of making impact to the world around us, there are amazing things you can do, right? But when you think about, the United States and, the people that we put in power, there is nothing else you could do that is more impactful than voting, right? Your singular vote on that day is more impactful than, anything you can post on social, anything, those types of things. Like it's a real impactful moment in time. And I started sort of my vote 2-minute warning talking about, look at it like a job, like you're hiring for a position within your world. And if you look at it as the people that are trying to be elected as part of this organization that are designed to represent you, like you should really have a say in what that means. It should really be a conversation about, who do you want to represent you when it all comes down to it. And I feel like sometimes we lose sight of the fact of how impactful, our voice really is and how that voting is the single greatest thing you can do to get that voice heard.
So we have a vote coming up
Yep.
in what, a week and a
We
half,
are we are I think a little over a week at
little
this
over a
current.
week away. So tell us a little bit more about these elections that are coming up. Why does local and state voting have such a huge impact on our everyday lives?
Well, if you and I always kind of refer to these elections, these sort of down ballot elections as the not so sexy elections. They don't get the pomp and circumstance or the fanfare that the presidential elections get, but the impact to our day-to-day lives are enormous, right? We're thinking about people that on the first day they take office could impact your immediate life, like on your street, in your town, just immediately, happening to you. I mean, listen, you could be voting for the person that their job is to fill the pothole outside your house, right? It could be that. Now, that's a very low level and not as, important factor, but think about that times hundreds within your local areas, right? Those are the people that are going to make those decisions. And I get it. In some places, the stakes are kind of low, right? You've got some folks on the ballot that, it could be the comptroller or a new sheriff. But I promise you, each and every one of those folks has an impact to your immediate life tomorrow, the day they get elected. But then there are situations like what's happening in Pennsylvania. Like we have three of our Supreme Court justices that are on the back of our ballot. And if you are voting in person or look at your ballot, please make sure you turn it over. We're gonna do the whole thing. I realize that seems kind of, but we're gonna turn the ballot over and make sure we're voting all sides of the ballot here. But we're voting in Pennsylvania to either maintain our current Supreme Court justice. That's a big
Big one.
deal. That's a big deal. And it's happening like that, mayors and governors. So I recognize that it may not get the sort of visibility that the presidential gets, but these folks are making an impact immediately on our lives.
So let's switch gears just a little bit and talk about myth busting.
Yes.
Dun dun dun. Can we have some dramatic music there? There's there's tons of misinformation floating around during every election cycle. So let's talk about it. What are some of the most common myths or maybe misconceptions you hear about voting?
So I think some of them are really about like how we vote or who votes and things like that. keep in mind that the folks that can vote, you have to be a US citizen, as an 18 years old or older as of November 4th, 2025. So that's who can vote, right? And that's a steadfast rule. It's been that way forever. You have in some states, and every state is a little bit different in terms of how you can vote. So if you decide to vote via mail or early, this myth that that's not as good as going in person or it's not as recognizable as going in person is absolutely not the case. All votes matter, all ballots are important. It really just comes down to what you feel more comfortable with, right? So I want, anybody out there, if you feel like I don't have the time on Tuesday to go in person and vote, or it's not convenient for me, or I don't have a ride, or whatever it might be, take that moment and get your mail in ballot done. If you can vote early, take that on. So that's one of the myths I think is important, that the way you vote is somehow more important than another, right? That is not the case, right? However you can get it done, I think is extremely important. Some of the other things I think that are a little bit myth busting, if I can kind of speak to it, is, it kind of goes to the young people a little bit, in that, this idea that your vote doesn't matter, I think is a really challenging thing to overcome. Maybe not even for just the young people, probably for all of us in some cases. And we could do a whole podcast on my feelings about the Electoral College, which is like a whole other thing. But no, in these down ballot elections, it is a popular vote. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. Your vote is gonna count 100%, no matter what. So, and they are razor thin margins when it comes to these elections. Even the presidential ones have been razor thin when it comes to those margins. But keep in mind, one vote could change everything about who's elected. Everybody's. Don't think for a second that it doesn't matter. Your vote is extremely important and it matters quite a bit. So I think, those are just a couple ones that I've heard that people just get a little bit like, it creeps into apathy a little bit about like, it'll be fine without me. There's a really good
Mm.
chance it won't be fine without you. We need you. We need everybody. I would love to see our numbers as a country get up into the 80s and 90% when we think about who's voting. And we're quite a long ways off. And in these down ballot elections, that number is way, way less. So chances are there's not going to be a long line. Just make a plan. Get in there, vote. If you can vote via mail, do that too. But just make a plan one way or another and stick to it.
I mean, I'm hoping this podcast is I'm hoping that we're gonna pick up a sand dollar here,
I know.
Jessica. I'm
Me
hoping.
too.
I mean, that's the hope here. How do you recommend voters educating themselves about those candidates and about those issues that might be on their ballots in a week and a half?
Sure. So first and foremost, what I want you to do is to check your voter registration. Make sure that's intact. If you voted before, just take 2 minutes and check that. I always like to recommend rockthevote.org because I feel like that keeps me tied to my, the rock and roll lifestyle I thought I was going to lead.
We are leading it.
Okay, all right.
In our own minds, we're leading it.
But as the MTV generation, like Rock the Vote was who, you had everybody from Madonna to anybody, telling you, rock the vote. And so I love that one because that harkens back to, my childhood. So, and they've got great information on there in terms of like your ballot and things like that. But you can also go to your state. So in my state, it would be pa.gov. They have all the information on, individual, ballots. You can put in your address and it'll show you exactly who's on your ballot in those areas. Really, I think When We All Vote is another one that you can go to. I've also seen some local newspapers do a great job. They'll do interviews with candidates and you can actually see them, get asked the exact same question and how each one of them answers, which I think is an unbelievable way to, make decisions about, who you're voting, because you're getting to hear them answer the exact same
Well,
question.
if they manage to answer the question
That's awesome.
without answering a question that maybe wasn't even asked.
Right.
Like,
No,
did
I
you
know.
answer the actual question that was given to
Right.
you?
So, I mean, it can be a little bit challenging and overwhelming sometimes. But I think, like I said, some of those organizations, like rockthevote.org and things like that, I love them. I think they do an unbelievable job of educating and also like keeping it I was gonna say keeping it cool, but that makes me sound not cool. Anyway, but they kinda do it in a rock and roll manner that's cool, I think.
What are some of the different ways that people can stay engaged year round, even when it's not election season?
So, I don't advocate for you staying on top of everything that the internet has to give you when it comes to politics. It's overwhelming. And I can tell you, just from my experience, like even my therapist tells me like this is the hot time of year that she's got to deal with a lot of people coming who are like, I'm so stressed out by all of this information. Take a break sometimes. Because it's not doing you any good to be bombarded by this information constantly. Keep yourself educated about the things that are important to you, what's happening in your community around you. But, also take breaks because it's a lot and it's a lot to wear on your soul too, because it does become overwhelming for sure. But, the other side of that coin is there's a lot of things you can do throughout the year that I think help things and also help you to feel like you're a part of things. You can obviously volunteer in organizations that support activities and things that you appreciate, right? That are important to you, that you want to make sure of. So that's an easy way. A couple other ways that I talked about a little bit last week, which was sometimes it can be really challenging, but we do also make an impact with how our dollars are spent. So if there are issues that really speak to you, that are things that keep you up at night, that worry you, quite a bit. And the organizations that you support financially, whether it's where you buy your groceries or where you buy, stream, whatever, anything you can think of, if they're not aligning to your goals, it may be a thought process that you can go through to think, is this something I can walk away from? Do I have other options that I could go to and maybe not spend my money in those areas? And believe me, it's a really tough conversation to have with yourself because I'm dealing with it right now on a brand that I love and use daily that I'm really struggling with some of the things that they feel. So it's not easy, but it is something you can do because it makes a huge impact. When we start talking about dollars and cents to shareholders, that's a big deal. And sometimes that can make changes where those organizations, as Maya Angelou and then Dolly Parton reiterated, know better, do better. So I think that quite a bit. In addition to that, I think, in addition to volunteering and kind of sticking up for voting and things like that, I also think it's important to just kind of look outside and look in your neighborhood, see if there are things that are happening within your own communities that you can, kind of join into, right? I love peaceful protests. I think it's such a powerful thing that exists here in the United States. And whether or not you agree with what the protest is, that's up to you. But this concept of being able to go and speak
Hmm.
about what you feel and stand up amongst like-minded folks. I've been to a couple. They are for me so emotional because seeing other people that feel the same way you do, so there is just it's amazing to have that feeling of camaraderie when you think like, I'm not the only one that's feeling this way, or I'm not the only one that's impacted by those things. So I think it's extremely powerful. So see what's happening in your neighborhood. Don't feel pressure, but if you feel comfortable enough and you can, take a friend or a loved one with you, it's a great experience when you're having that sort of, folks coming together and for a common good area. So I think those are just some areas that you can do at any point when it comes to this, but always, always make a plan to vote.
Right. That is powerful. Jessica, in my adulthood, I've done several peaceful protests and numerous actually.
Yeah.
And it is powerful to come together and just see people that are like-minded. I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. And I kind of chuckled at this morning because I like laugh and say I'm a modern day hippie. I really am. I really am a modern day
I
hippie.
love that.
And I would be remiss in this episode if I didn't say, be kind.
Oh,
Like, let's
yes.
just be kind. We have a whole lot more in common with each other than we may think that we do. And I
Preach.
think
Yeah.
right now is a time for us to show a lot of compassion, a lot of empathy, and just, I'm gonna be what I am. I'm a little modern day hippie. Just love each other. Just love each other right now.
Yeah.
There's so much going on to pull us apart. And for me, resisting that, I feel like is my mission right now. So I would be remiss if I
Well
didn't say
said.
that. I'm not getting political. I just would be remiss if I
Well,
didn't.
and I think it's there are very simple things you can do that speak to that, right? Like everyone kind of talks about like you go to Starbucks and you buy the coffee forward thing. That's awesome. If you've got an extra $6
Yes.
$9, that's great. But you could also let somebody out in traffic
Yes.
and wave to them when you do it, or like just very simple things. You have no idea how impactful a smile and a wave can be when somebody is feeling like garbage. It's extremely, and I love that, because some days when I feel I'm feeling really sort of overwhelmed by either what's happening in my own life or what I'm hearing, in the world around me. If you can walk out your door and just be a little bit nicer to folks, sometimes it even helps heal you a little bit as you're healing somebody else. So great, great point.
Truly.
Yeah.
This is so powerful. Jessica, I cannot thank you enough. I sprung this on you just a few days ago and we rallied and came together and we did this. I just really wanted to have this conversation, and very specifically, I wanted to have this conversation with you. So thank you for
I
jumping.
appreciate it. Absolutely.
Thank you for jumping on the train with me. Let's close out with your call to action.
Sure.
What can every listener do today to make a difference?
So first and foremost, check your voter registration. I know in Pennsylvania, our date to register has passed, but that doesn't mean you don't want to make sure you've got your registration intact. So check that out. Make a plan to vote. So November 4th is the date we'll vote in person, but early voting has started. Mail-in ballots have already started. You can still request those in some states, but that deadline is passing quickly. So if that's part of your plan, you listen to this now and do it now. And then when you vote, this is another thing that I've kind of tried to instill, but and I'm stealing from Parks and Rec here, but treat yourself. Years ago, when on election day, there used to be these big parties where people would, get together and celebrate the fact that they voted. And I'm so sad that we don't do that anymore. So take it upon yourself. If you go out and you vote, like, treat yourself, whatever that means. If that means, like getting your favorite donut or going to sit at the park for a little bit or whatever it is that might, be kind of a cool thing for you today, take that. You did a really amazing thing. There's probably nothing else you'll do that day that will be that impactful. Like, treat yourself a little bit, because it's an amazing thing you did. I know I'll be really proud of you. And even if you shoot me a note and told me you did it, I'll be really excited. So, just enjoy yourself a little bit when you go do that.
Thank you, Jessica, for bringing this message to life for all of us today. Friends, if you are listening, your vote truly matters. Your story matters. So let's keep showing up for both. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on Coffey Talk. A special thanks to my guests for sharing their story, and to you, the listener, for being a part of this conversation. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you never miss a Monday morning chat. Until next time, I'm Kate Coffey-Bacon, and this has been Coffey Talk.